Many times we don't understand the law. Law for the People with Eric Cedillo is here to inform, educate, and answer your legal questions. Thank you for tuning in today. From the law offices of Eric Cedillo, located at 1725 Greenville Avenue in Dallas, Texas, here's your host, Eric Cedillo.
Thank you guys so much for joining us this afternoon. This is Eric Cedillo with Law for the People. We've got some really special guests coming on today, and I'm really excited to speak with and talk to you today. But before we do that, Fern, just wanted to give a shout out with respect to the music to Prince, who recently passed away. Big loss for a lot of us, especially if you grew up during the era of Prince, which I certainly did. May he rest in peace, along with a few of the others who passed away in the last few weeks. But once again, this is Law for the People with Eric Cedillo. We, of course, come to you every Friday from 1 to 3. We have an audience that is kind of comprised across the world, I would imagine, Fern. We have some local folks running for office here in Dallas, Texas, and people listen across the board. So for those folks listening, we always kind of give the disclaimer that anything that you hear with respect to law is usually with respect to Texas law, and just kind of take that into consideration as we speak today. But let me introduce you to my first guest today, this afternoon. His name is Issac Faz, and he is running for trustee of District 7. Is it, Isaac?
That's correct.
And why don't you just introduce yourself to the folks, and let's talk about you a little bit.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on the program, and thank you and hello to all the listeners who are out there listening. And in Dallas, specifically, if you're in Oak Cliff, Cockrell Hill, or Arcadia Park in District 7 of DISD, thank you for listening.
OC!
The OC, I hope you get to vote fast on May 7th. Or actually, you can start voting early on Monday. Early vote starts on Monday, so you can start voting soon, and you don't have to wait in line. My name is Issac Faz. I am a candidate for District 7 for trustee for DISD, and I grew up in Oak Cliff, and I'm running because I want to make sure that every student has an opportunity to succeed in college or career. So just a little bit about myself. My parents are immigrants. They came from Mexico. My dad's from Ciudad Acuña, Coahuila. My mom was born in Puebla, and they immigrated in search for a brighter future, and that brought them to Dallas. And then that's where I grew up. That's where I was born and where I grew up. I grew up in Oak Cliff, went to schools in Oak Cliff, and that's sort of where that was our neighborhood. That's where we faced challenges, and we faced them head on.
Yeah.
But my dad worked in construction, so the unique thing was that many of my friends in my neighborhood, whatever your dad did, that's what you did on your free time.
Right.
So for me, I spent time working in construction on the weekends and on the summer as a kid, and it was really, really hot. And I remember one day, a couple of times, my dad would say, well, if you don't want to work in this heat, if you don't want to work in these conditions, then you got to stay in school.
Yeah.
So I really paid attention, and I stayed in school. I graduated. I started at the Dallas County Community College District because I was able to work and go to school. I needed to do that for me. And then I transferred to the University of Texas at Austin.
Okay.
That's where I graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Communication.
Hook 'em.
And then, thank you, hook 'em horns. And then I worked for a little bit before going to Thurgood Marshall School of Law, which is part of Texas Southern in Houston, Texas. And that's where I received my Juris Doctorate. So I am an attorney. I'm licensed, but I'm not a current practicing attorney, a real attorney like yourself. I focus more on legislative work and advocating for students in my job now. So that's what I did. And after graduating, my path has really been a little bit different, than typical attorneys. I think education has really given me the opportunities that I have today.
Yeah.
And those opportunities include working at the State House in Austin, Texas, working for State Representative Rafael Anchia and passing laws. And then I had the great opportunity to become a President Obama appointee at the White House in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen without education, right? And without being able to work hard and really sort of work and go to school and receive my JD and everything else. But one of the things I've always learned, when I was in Austin or Washington, was that when you have conversations with so many different organizations, every conversation always tends to go in one direction. And that's about the need for a quality public school, the need for a quality education, and the need for a quality workforce. And that didn't happen just in Austin or in Washington. It happens in Houston. Those conversations happen in Dallas. They happen in Oak Cliff.
Right.
Because we have a very diverse district. We have a very diverse city. And in Oak Cliff, there's 31 schools.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm running, because there's 31 schools in Oak Cliff that need a representative that grew up there, that has walked in the same footsteps that many of the students do, has walked in the same footsteps, or had some of the same challenges that those families have in Oak Cliff.
Let's get into that a little bit, Isaac. We're going to talk specifically about why you're run for trustee and really get into the nuts and bolts of what that's all about. But let's talk about you, if we could, just in terms of a chronology.
Okay.
You mentioned your parents had come from Mexico.
Yep.
Whenabouts was that? When did they come over?
They got to Dallas. My dad worked in some of the fields early on, but my parents immigrated they got to Dallas about the early 70s.
Okay. And you were born roughly
I was
about
born
that
in,
time?
my siblings and I, we were all born in Dallas.
Okay.
They arrived in the 70s and sort of landed in Oak Cliff, looking for opportunities.
Born in a hospital?
Oh, I was born in a hospital that no longer is there.
Oh, really?
I was born in St. Paul Hospital.
Okay, St. Paul.
So shout out to all those people in St. Paul that no longer.
I was born in Methodist, yeah.
Okay. My younger sister was born in Methodist in Oak Cliff, but no, I was born in St. Paul, and then I went to school. I started at L. O'Donnell, which is right there near Cockrell Hill.
Okay.
And then we moved from where we were there, and I ended up at Stevens Park, and then W. Griner, and then Sunset was my home school, but I applied for a communications or radio, television, film program at Skyline.
Okay. Brothers and sisters you mentioned. Where do you fall in that pecking order?
I have an older sister. I'm the second, then I have a brother, and then a younger sister.
Okay, so kind of the middle child.
Yeah, I always tell people I'm a middle child.
Yeah. I'm a middle child, so I know exactly what you talk about when you talk about those things.
Yeah.
We kind of kiddingly say that, but I think a middle child really has a lot of responsibilities, both above and below.
Yeah, you do.
It does mean a lot. Okay, so you grew up in public schools there in the Oak Cliff area.
Sure did.
Let's talk about you going off to college. Did you have any role models? Your parents, did they have an opportunity to go to college, or were you the first or second?
My parents, unfortunately, they didn't have the opportunity to go to college. Just like many immigrant stories that are, familiar across District 7, they had to come here and they had to work. They didn't have the opportunity to go to school. But they always emphasized the importance of education. As I said earlier, my dad said stay in school. And then when I graduated from college, my mom was very instrumental in telling me, keep going to school. Either get a master's degree or get, something else. And then I've always had an interest in law school. So she's the one that kept pushing me to go on. And then that's when I decided to attend law school. So no, but it's, but for my parents, it's been a great thing because, they're able to see their children sort of grow. And, I think that we all want to do what we can to sort of move the ball forward with respect to, our families, right? That we're going to be, we're going to do better than our parents did. Right. And then our children are going to do better than we did. And then our grandchildren are going to do better than our children do. And I think that's sort of the story of a lot of families. And that's why
where do you think your parents kind of got that? Where do you think that kind of evolved from, their sense of the need for education as a part of advancement? What do you think that was?
Well, I think that's a combination of just really, when you're out there working hard and you see these different opportunities, or more importantly, one of the reasons I wanted to go to law school was because I saw also how immigrants were being taken advantage of.
Okay.
And one of the things is once you're educated, I think you can defend yourself. Whether you defend yourself in a courtroom, whether you defend yourself in a boardroom, wherever it is. But once you receive that education, you can't uneducate the educated. I think Cesar Chavez has a similar quote to that, because then you know how to defend yourself. And my parents always thought early on, if our children have the ability to go to school, they have the ability to receive an education, then they're going to be okay. And they're going to be able to move forward and do better than we did.
Okay.
And I think that's where it comes from.
Let's talk about this a little bit. You mentioned not being a practicing attorney. And,
correct.
And, most folks go to law school, and I think that go to law school, have the, at least there was something in their background or something that prompted them to become a lawyer, go forward and do these things. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a lot more, I'm a clinical professor at SMU. We're seeing a lot more students take on, a variety of different normal practicing attorney type roles. Yep. It seems as though for you it was more of a, kind of a conceived or preconceived notion of what you were going to do. Sounds like it. You tell me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
Lines.
It was the experiences that I had as a child, right? The experiences working in construction and sort of seeing some of the challenges that people who either didn't speak the language or didn't really know how the system operated that were taken advantage of, whether it was on a pay, not being paid, at sort of construction job sites, but also during the 80s. I date myself here, but I was around in the 80s, and when the immigration, the naturalization was going on, I remember being in line outside of I-35 over there. I remember having to translate for family members or for friends because they didn't speak English. And at that time, there was always lines, and you had to get there early.
Yeah.
So for me, at that age early on, I sort of thought, for me to be able to help or to be able to do something else, I'm going to have to be able to go on. And I had the law school bug at that point because initially I said, I want to be an immigration attorney, or I want to be an attorney that sort of help me make a difference. And as I went on through school and as I went on into college and started volunteering on campaigns and things like that, I realized that you can also make a larger impact as an attorney working in policy, making sure that we're advocating for different individuals, for people, for communities, whether it's in Austin, whether it's in Washington, whether it's at City Hall or at the Commissioner's Court. I realized that there's another way to impact policy on a different scale. And that's something that I think is admirable, and I believe in public service. So
Okay.
I think that for me was sort of what was my trajectory and sort of changed the course of my life.
Okay, well, let's do this, Isaac. We kind of got your history, and I'd really like to go back to it at some point.
And I'm a Virgo.
Okay, Virgo.
So
And
whatever
that's good to know. Yeah, I don't think I know any other Virgos.
There you go.
Is the thing. What you're doing now? Where are you employed? What is it you do for a living as a non-practicing
As a
attorney?
non-practicing attorney.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Now I work in education. I work
Okay.
at the Dallas County Community College District. So for me, it's like coming back home.
Okay.
Because the community college really gave me my opportunity to be able to go to school, to be able to work, because I had to work. I mean,
Right.
not everyone has the opportunity to go to school and has a fund set up or, has a full ride scholarship. I had to work and go to school.
Yeah.
So it feels good to come back to the college and be able to help students, be able to go and fight for funding, making sure that we have workforce programs and solutions that are going to help our students so that way they can transition from right out of high school, receive a certification, and then go into a great paying job
Okay.
where we can contribute to the middle class and where we can contribute and grow. And a lot of those students are also, once they're able to have sort of their economics and their finances that are stabilized a little bit, a lot of those students then take advantage of saying, okay, now I want to finish a degree. Now I have this opportunity. We've been able to help our families. I've been able to help for whatever situation I was in. Now let me go forward. So I think that's important. So that's where I work in now. I work at the Dallas County Community.
How long you been there with the
I've been there now for almost a year.
a year? And
For almost
before
a year.
that, what have you?
Before that, I
How
was
you-
a practicing attorney.
Okay.
So I was working in the White House. Then I came back and was working at a law firm in Dallas as a land bank attorney, which means we partner with the city of Dallas for vacant properties and lots to convert them back to the city, and then the city takes over the property. So, I was doing that, and but then just realized that I wanted to get back into sort of policy and public service, and I wanted to come back, and so I sort of changed course, and went back into to what I like doing.
Tell us a little bit about your experience with the Obama administration. What is it you were doing? What is it you were kind of helping out with?
Yeah, in the White House, I was assigned to the trade office. So my responsibility was really engaging with governors, with mayors, with county officials, with city officials, making sure that we were keeping them informed, but more importantly, finding partnerships with those individuals so we can make sure that we were listening to them, making sure that we were submitting whether it was information that they wanted to, or more importantly, have their support in some of the policies that we were doing, that the president assigned us to do. So I worked in the government affairs part, but also worked in the public affairs, which meant that we, met with several stakeholders and groups. I mean, and when you go to Washington, there's so many groups. There's like pork producers, there's cattle, there's software. I mean, there's, you name it, they're all there.
Right.
So we had to make sure that we're reaching out to all those individuals, having meetings with them, also trying to bring them on board, because if the president is advancing an agenda, we want to be able to go and say, you know what, this city council member or this mayor or this state senator or this governor supports this. So now when our congressional team goes on the Hill, they're able to go say, look, these are all the people who are supporting our agenda and what we're trying to do to build America's middle class. And this is what we're doing. So we always try to partner and find ways to engage diverse stakeholders to make sure that we're trying to push the president's agenda forward to lower unemployment, which he did, and also to make sure that we're creating more jobs in this country, which we have. And we're obviously still got a ways to go, but I think we're on the right track.
Okay. Isaac, a little background on you. We kind of have, I think, a general sense of who you are and where you're kind of coming from. Born and raised here in the Dallas area. You're running for trustee of a school district which has an annual budget of what?
Almost 1.6, about 1.6 billion.
Almost $2 billion. So it is a major undertaking, and one that has incredible ramifications as a trustee, working as a trustee in DISD, a fiduciary responsibility to, I think, the children of Dallas.
Correct.
Tell me why. This is your first opportunity to kind of venture out into politics, right? You hadn't held another office or anything.
Correct. I've never run for any office. I've always just been engaged and involved in service, working, representing, Oak Cliff at the State House, and then, of course, working at the White House. But I've never run for office before in my life.
Tell us why. Why are you running for trustee?
Well, I think this is an important election. We really have an opportunity right now to sort of chart the course for DISD.
Okay.
We've just passed a bond, a $1.6 billion bond that was no immediate tax increase. We took advantage of 20 years instead of 30 years. So when we talk about, fiscal responsibility or fiduciary responsibility, then we have to say, look, we took advantage of this bond. We also took advantage.
Explain that to us. 20 versus 30.
Typical bonds are 30 years. So, we have the bond for 30 years, so we're paying it back. But this one, because of the low interest rate and because of where DISD was or is financially, they're able to go after a 20-year bond, which means we're going to pay that off sooner. And of course, we all know how interest rates were over the last year and a half. I mean, there's no secret. We had low interest rates. So I think it's a responsible thing to do from the trustees side to take advantage of that. So I'm running because not only did we pass the bond, we have to also think beyond the bond. What are we going to do 3, 5, 6 years also to impact and make a positive impact on our schools? Because remember, the bond is only $1.6 billion, and it's a lot of money. But the reality is that we know that there's about $4 billion worth of needs in DISD. And we know that, and we've seen it, if our schools continue to crumble, parents continue to walk away from DISD. And we know that the fact is that 90% of the students in DISD are students of color. 70% are Hispanic, Latino, 22% are African American. So that's a little about 92% are students of color. So we want to make sure that the largest school district in North Texas needs to get it right. Yeah. Because it doesn't only impact just the education of these students, because if we don't pass this bond, many of these students may not have another opportunity. They don't have another do-over in education.
Let's do this, Isaac. I know sometimes we kind of get into, this is the bond, this is the budget, all these things, and we don't always take into consideration what our general listeners are. Well, what are they talking about? What specifically does that mean? What is the distinction? Talked about the annual budget, which has nothing to do necessarily with the bond program.
Correct.
The bond program is for what? Kind of explain that to everyone, and we can kind of.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So the annual budget, it covers programs, it covers costs, schools, et cetera.
Right.
And out of that annual budget, about 85% of that is on human capital, right? DISD has 20,000 employees, teachers, administrators, principals, janitors, et cetera.
Right.
So 85% of the yearly budget is covered on human capital. The bond is on top of that. The bond is mainly going to do is additional revenue, additional money, dollars that make an impact on our facilities. So that's on top of that. Now, that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to help our schools, and that's what's going to help expand pre-K. It's going to help expand career and technical education, but it's something on top of the annual budget for DISD schools.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I was going to get into a little bit later, but I think it's a nice segue into talking about the Future Facilities Task Force.
Okay.
You had an opportunity to sit on that committee.
Yes, sir.
Had an opportunity to actually co-chair.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about that, what it meant, kind of the makeup of it, and what it kind of gave you an opportunity to kind of see the inner workings of the practicality of the bond, what it would go towards, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, the great thing about sitting on and participating, being a co-chair of the Future Facilities Task Force is that you really got to see the ocean of needs within DISD.
Okay.
Because there's schools all across the district that need help. There's portables that were set on fire. Actually, one at El O'Donnell caught on fire about a month ago. There's just all kinds of situations. If we want to talk about safe and secure campuses and really be honest about it, we want to talk about improving our schools and making sure that they're not dark and it feels like it's not inspiring for learning, then we have to talk about the bond. So the bond really sort of gave me and the 27 members an opportunity to see these are the oceans of needs within our school district. And then again, what we did, we started meeting for about a year. For a year, we started learning about the different programs that DISD wanted to focus on and say, you know what, these are the things that are going to improve our academics. This is what's going to help students graduate and be college ready, or graduate and be career ready. These are the ideas that we want to do, or that we have a very big interest in pushing forward. So after you learn about those programs, after you meet and you receive presentations and you get to speak to all these experts in different areas such as early childhood education or career and technical education, after all that, then you start sitting down and really going through footprints, demographics, boundary lines. You go through all of that information. We had a demographer from DISD who could literally move a line and say, this is how it impacts these schools. And then you have all those meetings, and we met for a year, and we had some school board members that came, some school board members that didn't.
Right.
And then you meet with the Board of Trustees throughout the year as well, and you present sort of, where are we today, sort of deal. Here's where we are. So we had those presentations so we could receive feedback as well from the board.
Okay.
And then we had presentations and meetings. From January of 2015 to August of 2015, we had 70 meetings and presentations. 70. That's quite a bit of meetings. So people who had thoughts, people who had opinions, people who wanted to see something change, they had that opportunity. So the good news is that we were able to say, okay, you know what, we feel after we've been discussing this for this long, that our responsibility as a task force is to make these recommendations to the board, and then the board decides yes or no. But before we did that, we met with every individual board member and their appointee.
Yeah.
So at that time, even again, the individual board member and their appointee had another opportunity to say, what did you think about this? Or how about this situation? And some of those meetings were actually very productive. And we were able to go back and make some adjustments because they said, you know what, this is what I'm hearing in my community, and this is what's important.
Tell us just real quickly so we can kind of get a sense of what it is. What was the makeup of the board? How were they appointed? How did that all come to be? How did you come to be the co-chairperson, things of that nature?
The makeup was very unique because we had every school board trustee appoint a person.
Okay.
That would be their liaison, their contact, their ear on the ground, if you will, about what was going on. So every school board trustee appointed a person. The second part of that was the administration said to the community members, okay, we're going to go out and recruit different community members.
Okay.
We had teachers on there. We had schools represented. We had Hispanic chamber, Black chamber, Asian chamber. We had so many different groups and organizations that were sort of invited to participate. I was at that time going through a leadership class called Leadership ISD, which I'm very proud of because for 9 months you really focus on public schools and public education. And I made it no secret that I wanted to be involved because I think it's important. I think education is really going to impact our city. And then we were literally at an event and we were talking about that, and I sort of threw my name in the ring as well. And I think after consideration, I was invited to participate. So I was very happy to be able to participate and learn more about our schools. But that's how the board was made up, and it was 27 members, and we met for about almost a year. I want to say it was like 10 months, 11 months, but it was really close to a year with on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis. I mean, there was a lot of meetings going on.
So I can get people to kind of understand, and I've seen some of the not necessarily attacks, but the hey, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, whatever it might be. What I'd like to point out and kind of get people to kind of understand. You talked earlier about $4 billion. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the need. Do you remember? Was there a report that kind of came out and said, hey, this is what we need?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, there's a report called the Parsons Report, and that's been adjusted because that report came out a few years ago. Right. And that report initially says there was a $4 billion needs in DISD. The thing I like to share with people is that if we don't do this, if we don't take advantage of these low interest rates and this 20-year bond, if we don't take advantage of that, those buildings continue to deteriorate. Right. Those buildings aren't going to get better with time. Right. The roofs continue to leak. There's continue to be issues, and those students continue to have to go to these schools. Right. So I always agree. There's no perfect bond. There's no perfect procedure, but we cannot allow perfect to be the enemy of the good. Yeah, and I think this bond does a lot of good.
I remember lots of people kind of attacking, don't get behind the bond because of this. What is the alternative? That we put nothing towards the needs that we have? If you're talking about a report that says we need at least $4 billion just to make things right, just to get us to where we need to be, and then we pass a bond that is 1.6, less than half of what the report kind of came up with, you're going to have situations where I would imagine that you'd be addressing the needs of folks that don't have heating, don't have air conditioning. The roofs are literally leaking. I would imagine for me that would be the priority. Now I understand the tech and the wanting to do other things and make the the classroom more innovative and that's understandable. But if you're talking about an entire school district, I would imagine those needs would need to get addressed first. Tell us what the thinking was behind the y'all's group in terms of what it was y'all were thinking. Were there priorities given to those basic needs, and then how did that kind of play itself out?
Yeah, and I just want to address something you started off with, before the question was that you're right. There were some people that were saying, no to the bond. And I always tell people, well, it's great, but I think saying no is not an answer, and that's not leadership. Because it's easy to be against everything and not for anything. Right. And if we're going to have vision, if we're going to have true leadership, then we need to also think, okay, what other options do we have? Because these kids cannot wait. So what we started doing really was we had all this information that was provided by the administration, right, by the school district. We looked at footprints. So where can we add classrooms? Where can we move boundaries? We also looked at portables because portables create a very dangerous situation. We went down to a school in Pleasant Grove where the principal told us there was a chase and that a person jumped the fence and ran through the portables. Right. That's a dangerous situation.
Right.
So we took into account, the footprint. We took into account the composition or sort of the shape of the schools and with respect to what they needed to be for repair. We took into account the demographics with respect to how many kids can we move any around. If we're going to add another wing, do we have the footprint there to add another wing? So that's what we took into account. So we put all those sort of factors. We looked at all those different factors and kept having conversations with people in the maintenance department, kept having conversations with the demographer, kept having conversations with all these other experts and financial experts as well. How are we going to get this bond done? Can we pass it with no tax increase? And how do we look at these priorities and then put it all together so then we can submit a recommendation to the school board? And then the school board in August, it was voted unanimous by the school board members that were there. They voted unanimous to pass this bond.
I would imagine that, as a trustee, you can only quite honestly devote so much of your time to looking into these issues. And I would imagine the appointments of individuals to sit on committees, to sit on forums and other things would be to kind of reach out into the community when you don't have an opportunity to quite honestly do it yourself. Trustees don't get paid, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's no paycheck.
So most of them, unless you're really rich, are have full-time jobs, have dedicated themselves to a commitment to the district and other things. So the utilization of these forums kind of provides an opportunity to kind of reach out to the community. You mentioned 70 meetings that you had. How many of those were kind of geared towards open community input type situations? Do you recall?
The overwhelming majority. We went to schools. I understand, and one of the things I always talk about is really being creative when we're trying to attract families, especially single parents, divorced parents, parents that work more than one job, because it's not always easy for someone to say, I can be there at 6 o'clock on a Thursday. So we have to do better when we have meetings, and not just with respect to the bond, but we have to do better just in general as a school district. But no, the overwhelming majority of those meetings were open. The overwhelming majority were at schools, at other organizations. So people had different opportunities to engage. But even all that being said, even with 70 of those meetings and presentations, I still think what else are we doing? I mean, I participated in a couple of webinars for nonprofits. We have to think how can we be more creative? How can we leverage technology? We have push notifications. We have different. What else can we do? We have to keep thinking. We have to keep looking down the road and saying how do we improve our outreach efforts? Because if we're really going to make an impact, then we want to bring other people on board, right? You're right. We can't do everything. And I am not fully funded with respect to, I'm not sitting, on a trust fund or anything. So I have to work full time. But the great thing is I work in education, and what I do goes hand in glove because I'm out there, I'm able to advocate for schools. I'm out there able to advocate for our students, but we need to welcome families. We need to welcome people, organizations back in. I had a great conversation with someone from a nonprofit that told me they wanted to go to DISD. They couldn't break through the gridlock. So they wound up sending their volunteers to a charter school. And that's a loss for us. We need to bring those organizations and those partnerships to DISD. So we need to figure out how do we make this. I mean, we have to go through, obviously, there's a process, right, to make sure kids are safe first and foremost. But how do we expedite this process to welcome in other partnerships, to welcome in other groups? Because the reality is that we need to give as many resources as we can to our schools, to our teachers, to our principals, and more importantly, to our community. So they're also engaged in this process.
You mentioned earlier, we kind of glossed over it in terms of what you were talking about, Leadership ISD. I've heard of the program. I've heard of a lot of good things. Tell me a little bit about it. Tell us about the actual program, what it does, what it is you guys kind of look at and study. It makes you better at what you do, I would imagine. Tell us a little bit about the program itself.
Well, the program is a great program, and I ask all your listeners, if you're really interested in learning more about education in public schools, please go online and apply to Leadership ISD. I want to say the application process either is about to close or just closed.
Okay.
But please take a look at it. It gives a great opportunity to have a really good in-depth discussion about education.
Okay.
So not only do we look at the financing part of it, but we look at the nonprofit and partnership part of it. We look at how do we close that achievement gap, right? How are we making sure that all students are sort of being able to compete? We have to make sure that we do all that sort of work. And it's a really good way to engage with other people, other education thought leaders, and let's have a really good discussion, because I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of people, a lot of families, and a lot of organizations that care about education, because it impacts our economy, it impacts our cultural and art scene here in Dallas. So it's a really great thing to have that conversation and go through that process with
Who
them.
would you say that people who should be perhaps applying to this program, interested in doing what in the future, giving you support or background? What types of people do you think should be applying for the program?
It's sort of an array of everyone.
Okay.
I mean, you'll see on there that, I was an attorney, and I worked in, I believe in public service as an attorney, so I applied to the program because I just wanted to learn more.
Okay.
There are people there that work in nonprofits. There are people there that work in corporations. There are people there that work in education. I believe we had also someone from DISD in there. So I think it's just a really great space for someone to say, let me just learn more and let me have really great civil conversations.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things that sometimes we forget about, right? There's so many people that are passionate, but what are we doing? Are we really talking about the facts? Are we really talking about what's important for the students? And that's a great space to have a good civil discussion. You look at facts, but more importantly, remember, we're not going to base everything on spreadsheets, because we know that there's communities behind these spreadsheets. So let's look at facts, but let's also look at the personal, sort of what is behind some of these numbers, and let's talk about the communities that are impacted by that. So that's why I really enjoyed my time there, because it's a really good opportunity to have that education and to gain knowledge. So if you really just want to be an advocate for public schools, an advocate for DISD, for public schools, public education, Leadership ISD is a great program.
Okay. Thank you very much, Isaac. We're gonna take a quick break, but when we get back, I really do want to get into what is a trustee, what are their responsibilities, what is it they do, what is your intake on or the impact of a trustee, what it kind of looks like, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, and perhaps some specific policies, some of the things that currently DISD is kind of going through, and we'll get into that in about 3 minutes.
Perfect.
So you guys, please stay tuned. Hopefully, Fern, we've got some prints on tap for you. Once again, we'll be back in about 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Electric word, life, it means forever, and that's a mighty long time. But I'm here to tell you.
Many times we don't understand the law. Law for the People with Eric Cedillo is here to inform, educate, and answer your legal questions. Thank you for tuning in today. From the law offices of Eric Cedillo, located at 1725 Greenville Avenue in Dallas, Texas. Here's your host, Eric Cedillo.
Thank you so much for rejoining us. We are here with Issac Faz, who is running for trustee for DISD, Dallas Independent School District. And Isaac, we were talking before the break a little bit about getting into some actual practical implications of being a trustee and other things. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about charter schools.
Okay.
Now, charter schools for most people, just kind of generally out there, what are they? And how do they kind of differentiate themselves from, when you have a private charter and what's happening in DISD?
Sure. Well, charter schools are another option for families to send their students. I mean, they're essentially open enrollment campuses, but obviously they don't have the capacity to take in as many students as DISD does. And when a student goes to a charter school, the dollars follow the student.
Okay.
So the funding from the state or all that funding goes wherever the student goes. So technically, if more students go to charter schools, then that means less funds go to DISD.
Okay.
And that's basically how it works. But it's something that's been growing. I know there's been a lot of headlines recently about charter schools, and I want to say roughly, I heard Dr. Nehosa, the superintendent, say that there's like 27,000 students, close to 30,000 students that could be DISD students, but they're in charter schools.
Okay. So what do you think about them? As a trustee, I would imagine as a trustee and with that duty and that relationship with DISD, that charter schools wouldn't necessarily be a good thing for the district. But what do you think about that in terms of choice? Some proponents would say, well, it's an opportunity for parents to send themselves to, send their kids to a certain place. But it does detract from the overall ISD, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And, the first thing I always like to say is that I'm never going to second guess or judge a parent. However it is they decide where they send their students to school, whether they send them to charter schools, private schools, parochial schools, home schools. That's a decision with the parent and their child, because they have to make tough decisions as it is, and that's a decision that they have to make, and I respect that. That being said, charters are a competition for DISD, but if we're going to win that competition, then we need to provide a better education. We need to make sure that we're setting up our students to succeed in college or career, because if we're going to be successful, then we need to make sure our students are successful. So charter schools is a competition. Secretary King, who's obviously the secretary at the Department of Education, said about a month and a half ago that charter schools can be a hub of innovation. So charter schools are going to stay around, right? That's a marketplace decision. It's going to stay there. But what we need to focus on as trustees is not really sort of going out there and banging against charter schools. In my opinion, we need to focus on as trustees is fighting, making sure that we're doing the best that we can for DISD.
Yeah.
How are we improving our programs? How are we going to improve our facilities? I always go back to the bond. The bond is part of that. How are we going to do the best that we can so we can keep teachers, so we can keep principals, so we can keep families in DISD? Because we know that 85% of the students in DISD qualify for a free or reduced lunch. So that means that we need to attract other families into DISD. If we're going to have what they call socioeconomic integration, where there's research that shows in Montgomery County, as a matter of fact, in Maryland and other programs, if we're going to have these things, then we need to attract different kinds of families with very diverse socioeconomic backgrounds.
Right.
And then at that point, we can then say, okay, now we have community schools. Now we have leadership schools. Now we keep growing, and that's how we compete with charter schools.
It's funny, this morning we had an opportunity to speak with A.C. Gonzalez, who's our city manager here in Dallas, and we were talking about I don't know where the debate was kind of coming from, but we were talking about where Dallas falls in terms of poverty. And believe it or not, I think most recently we're number 3 among the major cities,
that's correct.
behind I think Detroit and Memphis, which I was really surprised to hear. But of course, Dallas, historically we're relatively landlocked. We don't pull in a lot of the other smaller. So we have a lot of independent school districts within and around Dallas that I think people don't always realize. So to have that high level of poverty within the district, that means something, and it means something specific to what the trustees are looking at, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it does, because we know there's, like I said earlier, there's enough research that shows we have to have more integration of economics. And I'm not talking about any other program. I'm talking about voluntary programs where schools have an open admission, where we can have more students like at Irma Rangel, leadership for young women, or Barack Obama Mill Academy, or now we have Solar, a STEM school for young girls. We have to have these options and these opportunities to really diversify what we're offering and bring back different families. So, Cliff, but also stabilize what we have now.
My goodness.
Because if we're going to attract businesses, and I want to get to that, because if we're going to attract businesses like Toyota, and Toyota just invested $1 million in Plano ISD for a partnership, then we have to have strong schools, because it's going to impact everybody. And people say, well, I don't have any kids, or my kids already graduated from DISD. You're a taxpayer.
Right.
You're an investor in this school district. So we have to make sure that we get this right, because it's too important for us not to get it right, because it impacts us at every level.
Yeah, I was talking to my my daughter, my adult daughter, recently. We were talking. She went to Townview. She graduated from TAG Townview.
That's a great school.
Fifth year in a row. They're ranked number 1 public school. I don't know if people listening realize, but this is number 1 throughout the country.
Yeah.
And so that's an amazing achievement. Why can't we emulate that across the district? What do you think? How can't we not duplicate that in other places and other schools?
Yeah, that's going to be a multi-pronged approach on how we do that. I was just there at Townview yesterday. The great thing about sort of these opportunities as you get to speak at different career days as it's getting close to the end of the
Right.
school year. So I was there speaking to them. I've spoken to LK Hall. I've been to other schools. And it's always great to see the enthusiasm and energy from these students. But you're right, as you go to different campuses, they have different challenges. So the way we emulate that is really, what are we going to do as a community? And are we going to have a board of trustee that's focused on being productive at the board meetings, that we're focused on student outcome and student achievement? I think that's really important. And that's the kind of trustee I want to be. That's the kind of trustee I want to be. And I want to be able to build these partnerships. I want to be able to move the ball forward, if you will, to make sure that we're emulating these programs. And we have one option right now for those District 7 listeners is the old Adamson. That building is there. DISD has it. I would fight. I think a lot of people would fight, especially the community, to keep that school and then make it maybe a transformation school with the idea, I think it's called City Lab, where it's about policy, architecture, and really city planning. That could be a great school in Oak Cliff to go along with like Trinity Garza Early College High School, and then help build our other schools in our district. Because we have good schools, Molina, Sunset, Adamson, all these schools. And if we can add another one, or we can keep increasing our schools there and add another transformation school to bring in other people and other ideas, I think that helps Oak Cliff. So we can emulate that. I think the bond is the start of that, because we expand pre-K, we expand other options and other choices, but that's just a start. We still got to move forward. We still got to look forward. We still got to look down the road a little bit.
I want to talk a little bit about that, kind of the relationship with your particular district, and then overall in the sense of what DISD looks like, what the obligations of a trustee are, both to, again, their district and DISD as a whole. And I want to get into that, hopefully, if we have time. What I did want to get into right now, though, is the pre-K programs. I heard this morning that Irving ISD was going to go towards trying to get as many pre-K opportunities as possible. I know there's been talk about pre-K and the age range in terms of what we want to attract and getting a full day pre-K. Talk about some of the challenges to having something like that, and some of the uptick. What is the good side about pre-K? I think we've had this discussion before, and what it kind of means. I don't think people really realize the importance of it, especially in a district like Dallas.
No, pre-K and early childhood education is very important. I mean, and full disclosure, I'm a benefactor. I benefited from going to pre-K program because at home I grew up speaking Spanish. Right. So I didn't learn English until I got to pre-K. And I don't know, you may challenge me on my English. I didn't really learn it, but I didn't learn English until I got to pre-K.
I don't even hear the accent anymore,
okay.
Isaac.
That's because we're the same. That's right. So I learned to speak English in pre-K. So I'm a big believer in pre-K and the benefits and what it can do for our students. Yeah. We know that a child's brain is developed, 90% developed by the time they reach the age of 5. So we have to get to them early, and pre-K does that. It really benefits the children, because if we get to them early and if we have good instructors and we have good resources for those students, by the time they reach the 3rd grade, if they're on course to the 3rd grade and they're able to succeed in math and reading, then that really sets them up to be successful. Yeah. There's enough research that shows if they're not reading at that level at 3rd grade or at math, they start going the other way, and they really start having challenges, and more than likely they could end up dropping out or having just other challenges as they try to complete their education. So pre-K is very important, and I like to go back to the bond. The bond was passed by District 7 voters, passed by Dallas voters. And, in District 7 specifically, we expand pre-K now because of the bond at El O'Donnell. We expand pre-K at Peabody. So that's really important for people to know Cliff and Cockrell Hill.
And you talk about the investment in terms of folks who may not have children and investing in your city and the tax paying. Mm-hmm. We literally, in the state of Texas, kind of determine the number of future beds in our prison system based on where our kids are reading in 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. If that is not an incredible correlation between our future and our present action, I don't know what is. But it's something that is solid, and we can project what's going to happen. So incredibly important in terms of what pre-K is. Let's talk about a little bit about dual language. Tell us a little bit about that, what it is, how it's currently implemented, how we can improve it. Tell us a little bit about that, Isaac.
Well, the good thing is that dual language programs, Dallas ISD is one of the leading school districts in the country with offering dual language programs. And this is not just what, some of us, from a certain group, like my age group, that understand ESL as dual language. No, this is like a two-way dual language, right? Where it's immersion and things like that, where they have classes in both English and Spanish. So that's a great opportunity, and it's an offer. Not everybody has to take it, but I think we know that if we are going to be in a global society and this is sort of what the world looks like, then and we need to offer those opportunities for our students to be able to compete.
What does it currently look like in DISD? What does a dual language program look in DISD?
Well, there's wonderful programs. I mean, one, I'll point to one in Oak Cliff at Rosemont. It's been there for such a long time. I think there's been a lot of successes in that dual language program. I've spoken to parents that are really happy with it. But we also have to offer those at other schools because those opportunities we need to have. We shouldn't be comforted by the fact that we have an island of excellence in one area, but let's push out these ideas. Let's push out these programs. Let's make sure that other schools, whether it's Henderson or Bethune or other schools, Bowie and other things, that they have these opportunities as well. So I'm a big believer in saying, okay, we know it works. Now DISD is choosing to expand, and they're going to add more campuses for dual language, which I'm a big believer in. So let's make sure they have the resources. Superintendent Hinojosa has committed to investing, I think, $6 million a year for the next 10 years in early childhood. But dual language is also going to be part of that. To make sure that we're being successful.
I know Fern's probably looking at me kind of funny saying, hey, we're about there, but there was one issue that I really wanted to address, and one of our listeners had sent us a question about it, and I think it's incredibly hot topic, incredibly important in terms of what we look. What obligation or what responsibility do you think specifically trustees may have in terms of policy with respect to bullying in schools? I know it can be incredibly prevalent in some of our across the board, but in elementary school, there's some real unique challenges for dealing with bullying, especially the bully. How do we deal with that? What do you think the responsibility of a trustee is to ensure the safety of our children and stop the bullying?
Yeah, no, I think the trustee needs to be engaged, and we need to make sure that we look at the policies that are in place, and how do we change those policies to make sure that we get rid of bullying, because we should, there's no tolerance for that. I mean, there's too many examples of how that impacts students emotionally, socially, and also physically, obviously. So we need to make sure that we get it right, because, a lot of these students that are doing that, what are we doing on the school, making sure that we're addressing it not only with at the student, whether it's disciplinary level, but what are we doing to train, or provide resources to teachers or to principals, making sure they're seeing this, making sure they're able to identify it, and then at the same time provide those opportunities for that other person. Maybe there's something else that's going on that we're not scratching the surface as of yet. So we need to take care of that. We need to look at our policies and make sure that doesn't happen, because there's no room in DISD for bullying, because we know that bullying continues, and even to adults it continues.
Absolutely.
People try to bully people at stores.
Fern was trying to bully me earlier. I said, hey, man,
exactly.
come on.
So it keeps going, so we need to stop it. There's no place for that in DISD.
Okay. Real quickly, Isaac, before we sign off with you, and thank you so much for coming out today. Tell us a little bit, tell us about the when voting is happening, what they should be looking for, how they can get out and vote. You've already had to have registered, but tell us a little bit about that.
You should already be a registered voter. That deadline has passed, but it's a great opportunity for different people. We have a moment where we have to take a look at our schools and say, what are we going to do to make sure these students have that opportunity to succeed? And I think that moment is in May. May 7th is the election. Now, early voting starts on Monday, April 25th, and goes through May 3rd. So I always tell people, it's a great thing to early vote, because there's not a line. You can go anywhere in Dallas County, just take your ID or your passport and go vote anywhere in the county. So you can start voting early Monday, April 25th, and then go through May 3rd. And then election day is actually May 3rd. And I'm really honored and really humbled to be running for this position, because it's only one generation ago that my grandmother, who immigrated here from Mexico, worked at a school cafeteria inside District 7. And, one generation later, her grandson is running to represent not only that schools, but 31 schools that make up District 7. So it's also personal for me. It's also personal because I have, family in 6 of those 31 schools. So my name is Issac Faz. I ask for your support, I ask for your vote. And as my niece would say, she's a little bit more social media savvy than I am. She always says #VoteFaz. So please do that. And thank you for your time. And it was a pleasure being here.
Orale, Isaac. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to meet with another trustee or potential trustee, Jaime Resendez. So please rejoin us in about 3 minutes.